Have you ever stopped to wonder if maybe you're living right in the wrong way? That everything you've been taught about success, purpose, and faith might be suffocating you instead of setting you free? Sounds absurd, doesn't it? But what if the real problem in your life isn't the lack of meaning, but the overwhelming expectation that life should make sense? The one who wrote these ancient words had it all, absolutely everything most people spend their lives chasing. And what did he discover? That all is vanity. In the original Hebrew, Hevel, vapor, smoke, illusion, something that seems firm but slips through your fingers. It's the feeling of reaching the top and thinking, was that all? It's the same void that visits when you hold someone you love and suddenly wonder how long you'll still have them. That's when the forbidden question emerges. What is real if even God seems distant? And within that question, a rare kind of anguish is born, one that doesn't come from a lack of faith, but from too much lucidity. There's a kind of wisdom that doesn't comfort, it unsettles. It looks you in the eye and says, you were never in control. And deep down, you know it's true. Life moves through forces that don't ask permission. One day begins, another ends. Joy arrives, loss follows. Time decides we merely are passed through. Accepting that hurts, but resisting it only deepens the illusion. What if true liberation comes from accepting that meaning isn't born from permanence, but from presence? A tender gesture, a job done with love, a sincere gaze. Small things, but real. And interestingly, those things don't die with time. They don't need stone monuments to leave a mark, because where there is truth, time cannot erase. We move through life as if we're in control. Goals, plans, routines, processed spirituality. But then, without warning, something breaks, and suddenly, you realize you've been stacking days like someone stacking wind. Pleasure lost its taste. Faith turned silent. Achievement didn't fill the void. And the worst part? No one seems brave enough to say it out loud. There's a strange moment, almost imperceptible, when what once brought joy begins to feel heavy. Your favorite song no longer moves you. Laughter feels forced. Beauty loses flavor. The soul doesn't cry out. It just falls silent, as if something sacred within you has died quietly, without ceremony or mourning. And what remains is an echo, the echo of excess. The silence of God isn't absence. It's an invitation, a call to abandon the illusion of control and step into another dimension, surrender. Because once even the summit leaves you hollow, maybe it's time to descend, not as defeat, but as awakening. There's a truth few admit: success is exhausting, not because of the journey, but because of what it reveals. When people finally arrive, they realize the top is lonely, and often hollow. The void that follows victory is more disturbing than failure. At least failure still holds hope. But at the top, all that remains is the echo of a question. Now what? Eating with joy, working with meaning, loving with surrender, and above all, and staying awake, that takes courage. The courage to stop waiting, to live, to no longer delay what really matters in the name of applause, safety, or legacy. Because one day, and that day always comes, the body will weaken, the mind will fade, and time will take us. This video won't hand you easy answers. It's a mirror, a deep dive into one of the strangest and most brutally honest texts ever written. A book that tells you, without hesitation, that all is vanity, that control is an illusion. The question doesn't come loudly, it seeps in between one day and the next. What if none of this makes sense? And suddenly, what once felt certain turns to fog. Success dims, rituals lose color, The soul realizes it's been stacking days, like someone stacking wind. You may have achieved a lot, yet still taste the bitterness of emptiness, because when finitude reveals itself, neither fame nor wisdom nor pleasure can hold the weight of existence. There are wounds reason can't reach. When they come, pretty phrases don't help. Everything has a purpose, people say, but inside, the soul wants to scream, "Where was God when it all fell apart?" These ancient words dare to ask that question. They don't sugarcoat it with religious cliches. They expose it, because sometimes God's silence feels more brutal than pain itself. The idea of leaving a legacy is seductive. We want to be remembered, do something lasting, build something eternal. But the truth is, all empires rot. Every company changes owners. Every house is sold. Even tombstones lose their names. This is the part no one wants to face. Time doesn't honor even our noblest efforts. No matter how much we try to preserve our presence, finitude always laughs last. And if you want to help more people wake up with you, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, because the world is already full of noise, but still missing voices that speak from the soul. That even the sacred that goes silent, but if you have the courage to listen, you might find something no one ever told you, a kind of freedom that doesn't come after success, but right in the middle of the absurd. And that might just be your turning point. But perhaps, just perhaps, that realization is where liberation begins. When you understand that nothing lasts, a new opportunity arises. To live without masks, without racing, without pretending. This writing doesn't want you to win at life. It wants you to face it eye to eye with an exposed heart, because it's in that spiritual nakedness that something else begins to pulse. A presence that only emerges once all certainties have been stripped away. The author didn't lose faith, but he had to mature it. Childlike faith wants quick answers. Mature faith endures silence, believing without guarantees, loving without return, continuing. Even when everything crumbles, that is faith with consciousness, and it's rare. It's surrender, not as resignation, but as courage, to remain without a signal, to walk without a path, to trust without proof. And it's here that consciousness touches a hidden wound. Maybe what drives many people isn't purpose, but fear. Fear of vanishing, fear of being forgotten, fear that it was all for nothing. So we accumulate, we perform, we project ourselves onto our children, our brands, our causes. But deep down, it's just vanity, trying to look like eternity. There are days when silence screams. You're there, breathing, walking, fulfilling tasks, but inside, something sinks without a sound. It's like the soul, long smothered, is trying to whisper that something is cracking. It's not a pain that makes you cry. It's a kind of existential weariness, eating slowly, as if your spirit has been exiled from your own body. In this state, people try to run faster, win more, consume more, and end up sinking even deeper. The issue isn't outside, it's the loss of consciousness about what truly matters. A single, mindful cup of coffee may be more spiritual than 1,000 mindless conquests. Simone Weil said that God's absence is the purest form of his presence, because it's the kind of love that refuses to manipulate us. God doesn't force his way in. He waits, and perhaps it's in that space between suffering and response that true faith lives. When it does, faith stops being a theory and becomes ground that prepares the soul for another kind of knowing. That's not a moral flaw. It's the soul, terrified, trying to cling to something that won't dissolve. But what if the value of life isn't in how long it lasts, or how many people remember it? And all that will remain is what was lived with presence. And if everything really is smoke, may that smoke at least carry fragrance, because a soul that lives awake can turn even the ephemeral into eternity. Everything around keeps moving, but you've stopped, somewhere nameless, caught between what the world demands and what your essence longs for. When we're full of everything, or we feel nothing, sensitivity, or that sacred ember, drowns in the noise of more. It hurts differently, not like an open wound, but like rust on the soul, slowly consuming day after day. Pleasure becomes empty repetition. Achievement turns into mechanical ritual. Modern culture insists we can shape everything, careers, bodies, destinies, but anyone who has truly lived knows many things slip through even the tightest grip. The soul becomes a resume, emotion becomes a product, even spirituality becomes performance, a devotional for show, a timed prayer. Everything must produce, even faith. But there's a kind of weariness that sets you free. It arrives when the soul, tired of pretending and just wants to exist, without labels, without applause, without stages, just to exist. Now tell me, what will you do with everything you just felt? Will you file it away as another beautiful thought, or will you allow these words to become a turning point? Because life doesn't change with grand promises. It changes with small awakenings, and maybe today was one of them. Will you keep chasing the wind, or pause for a moment and truly breathe? It's hard to describe, like looking at the sky and no longer feeling awe, like hearing a sacred song and no longer being moved. Your consciousness begins to see what the eyes have ignored, a life lived without presence. And when this awareness arrives, it comes with a strange weight, like the end of a prayer that was never answered. Maybe it's the silence of God, or maybe it's Him telling you that something within must die, so something deeper can finally live. The greatest illusion of success is believing that once you reach the top, you'll find peace. But when the summit is reached, what many find is silence. Not celebration, just silence. The soul looks around and realizes there is no heaven here. What seemed like glory is just another layer of vanity. It doesn't feel like victory. It feels like vertigo, a spiritual dizziness, whispering, now what? What was once a dream turns into demand. What was once a goal becomes a prison. And in silence, it all reveals a subtler face of vanity. Often we don't pursue purpose, we chase comparison. We strive not for meaning, but out of fear of being left behind. And in this invisible race, the other becomes a measuring stick. We want to be better, not because it transforms us, but because it validates us. Is it possible to live more fully? Even knowing that all is vanity, can we find beauty, even in the silence of God? If you've ever felt that unnamed tiredness, that subtle but heavy anguish, then something inside you is ready for change. And this isn't a change that begins outside, it's a deep inner realignment, a lucid surrender, a quiet liberation. And what if that's it? What if this weariness is a veiled invitation to surrender, a quiet way of freeing you from the illusion of control, the one that keeps everything polished on the outside, but hollow on the inside? There are moments when the spirit bows, not out of weakness, but out of clarity, because at that point where vanity is exposed as dust, the soul finds space to listen, and what it hears changes everything. There are no shortcuts here, no gentle promises, just a quiet invitation to surrender. When the soul stops running and dares to face the silence of God, something shifts. The thirst is no longer for pleasure, but for truth. And that thirst only arises when all the fake fountains have run dry. That's when a new search begins, one that's more rare, more honest, and it only starts when everything that used to be enough stops working. That's when surrender ceases to be defeat and becomes wisdom. Wisdom that's born from presence. And in that kind of presence, even uncertainty becomes shelter. There are rare moments when everything falls quiet. It might happen while washing dishes, hearing an old forgotten song, or simply watching the light fall through a window. Nothing extraordinary, but something inside opens. The mind stops running, the heart lets go, and the soul gently lands. In that moment, life reveals its sacred side, not in greatness, but in simplicity. The ancient writer of these words had lived it all: palaces, wine, women, fame, power, everything. And in the end, he looked at all of it and declared, "Chasing the wind." That's not failure, that's clarity. The understanding that the soul cannot be fed with the leftovers of pleasure. And when that clarity dawns, a new kind of thirst awakens, one that no external source can quench, one that starts leading the spirit toward another kind of search, deeper, quieter. Pain arrives uninvited, death disregards contracts, fortune ignores resumes, the sense of justice shatters, and with it collapses the lie that doing everything right guarantees the right outcome. Merit is noble, but reality is wild. And yet, there's beauty in this. When the soul stops wrestling with time and starts walking with it, something shifts, not to tame it, but to move with it. It's not escapism, it's faithfulness. Living in the now doesn't mean abandoning the future or denying the past. It means realizing nothing is guaranteed, not even the next breath. And that's not tragic. It's freeing, because if all is vanity, as we've said, maybe the only possible truth lies in this exact moment. There's something more unsettling than pain or boredom, numbness disguised as comfort. The soul clings to empty distractions, like someone trying to keep a dead flame alive. It walks through landscapes that shine on the outside, but are dry on the inside. Every automatic gesture, every recycled pleasure is a desperate attempt to avoid a difficult truth. The spirit is starving for meaning. Some discover it in crisis, others on an ordinary afternoon, washing dishes as the sun cuts through the kitchen window. 1 second of presence is enough to dismantle years of character building. And when that moment arrives, what looked like failure might actually be the first sign of truth. The one who wrote these ancient words saw it clearly. He saw that between obvious suffering and routine boredom, there's a more dangerous trap. A place where everything works, but nothing fulfills. Pleasure without consciousness becomes fraud, a sweet intoxication that fades quickly. It's like drinking mist, thinking it's water. The more you consume, the more lost you become. The present, long ignored, becomes the only place where existence truly pulses. Many confuse that feeling with depression, but it's not. It's awareness, the soul waking up after years of numbing promises. When everything is possible, nothing carries weight. When nothing is denied, nothing is sacred. The soul seems to say, "You gave me the world, but you never asked what I truly needed." The writer wasn't depressed. He was awake. He reached the peak of power, wisdom, and pleasure, and still found emptiness.